the same time, they saw something else and they could describe it in millimeter precision, like almost like the pyramid. And that's what they saw. That's the tomography.
Which can I just make it, just looking at these images, to claim millimeter precision is the silliest thing in the world. This is so blurry. It is clearly not millimeter level precision. The team claims that there are enormous coiled passageways, something akin to a spiral staircase, descending over 1.5 kilometers underneath the Khafre pyramid at Giza, and that below that are 4 cube-like enormous chambers of 80 meters in width and 80 meters in height. I want you to ask yourself, if Dr. Filippo Biondi's method is such a game changer that it can be used for the prospection of valuable minerals and oil, let alone for archaeological and geological applications, why would he let his patents expire?
I was one of the original reviewers of the article. They go through all kinds of jargon, like doppler effect and things like that. I read that and I thought to myself, what in the world are you talking about? Don't try to play these jargon games with me on Doppler effect with regards to electromagnetic energy.
It is so easy to overinterpret satellite imagery. I could get any satellite imagery to look almost any way I wanted with enough manipulation. I am that good at it. I think that's what these guys, they've done. They've willfully misinterpreted the data, and the satellite imagery, SAR data can't see through rock. Period. The end.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. We've all heard about these enormous subterranean structures 2 kilometers under the pyramids of Giza. They shouldn't exist. Or should they? Grab a good beverage of your choice. I've got some lovely Welsh whiskey. Grab a snack, because we're going to investigate. As you make your way down into the earth, under the sands of Egypt, down through a passage carved into the limestone bedrock, and deep below the surface, as you continue down dozens and hundreds of meters, it will get warm. As you pass from hundreds to thousands of meters underground, it will get scalding hot. This heat is due to the geothermal gradient, the heat rising from our Earth's molten core. On average, for every kilometer you go underground, the temperature will rise by about 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 80 or so degrees Fahrenheit that it rises. What that means is that 2 kilometers under the Earth, the temperature will be more than 60 degrees Celsius or over 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Scalding hot. That's hotter than the highest temperature ever recorded on the Earth's surface and above the temperature that humans can survive. The geothermal gradient, that increase in temperature that happens as you go deeper into the Earth, is a key piece of scientific evidence for assessing the most viral archaeological claim of the year, that there are enormous structures buried 2 kilometers under the pyramids at Giza, detected using a new method called synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography, also known as SAR Doppler tomography. The team claims that there are enormous coiled passageways, something akin to a spiral staircase, descending over 1.5 kilometers underneath the Khafre pyramid at Giza, and that below that are 4 cube-like enormous chambers of 80 meters in width and 80 meters in height. They've released this series of mock-up images of what these structures might look like. So yeah, we got some crazy claims here. This is Archaeology with Flint Dibble, and I am Flint Dibble. Right now, we're going to do the ultimate debunk of these absolutely ludicrous claims for an underground city at Giza. And yes, I'll need my tinfoil hat and some good Welsh whiskey to do these claims justice. These sensational claims for megastructures under the pyramids were presented publicly at a press conference in March 2025 by the Khafre Project, a team of 3 independent Italian researchers: Dr. Corrado Malanga, a former professor of chemistry, Dr. Filippo Biondi, who has a PhD in electrical engineering, and Armando Mei, who is an independent researcher interested in Egyptology. Despite their advanced degrees, let's be clear, these guys are fringe. There's nothing wrong with fringe ideas. I love to have a good time and imagine some wacky ideas too, with or without some wacky tobacco. But it's important context here because it shows how these guys move beyond their education and expertise. Oh, it's falling. Ah! It shows how they've moved beyond their education and expertise and into the fringe. As I learned recently from Italian archaeologist and YouTuber Archaeomila, Dr. Corrado Malanga, the chemist, is famous in Italy, but not for his chemistry research.
But he started to be famous for another thing correlated to this, that is hypnosis, because he started to hypnotize people who believed that they have been abducted by aliens. And that's the main thing he got famous for many years ago, like 20.
So he's mostly famous for hypnotizing people who claim to have been abducted by aliens.
Exactly.
And he's extremely famous in Italy for this.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, we are in full tinfoil hat territory. Wacky claims are nothing new for these guys. But these recent claims at Giza have moved from the fringe to the mainstream, being covered in newspapers and popular podcasts. The big problem is that the claims made by this Italian team are really difficult to assess because they are based on a new and still unproven method, SAR Doppler tomography, and because nothing has been published in writing by the team, not in a peer-reviewed journal, nor even in a simple blog or online essay. So it's difficult to fact-check them. Look, the only publicly available information are presentations, oral presentations, and podcasts on YouTube. There isn't even a website describing their findings or collecting the images that they've created. It's really just all smoke and mirrors. However, Filippo Biondi's recent viral appearance on the American Alchemy podcast with Jesse Michaels has racked up 500,000 views in 10 days, which means that these claims are becoming more and more a part of public discourse online. After all, views means news. So it's time to look at them in detail and provide the ultimate debunk of these under the pyramid scans.
There is something, the Giza has to be something that is related to give a better life of the people at the time living there. So maybe an energy power plant, something related to chemical, something related to, I don't know, mining, something related, but or a combination of everything. So there is something that is related to make better live people there.
Yeah, maybe it's this or that, or maybe it's all these maybes. I mean, whatever. Look, before we go to the tinfoil hat territory, before we jump off the deep end into speculation, as an actual scientist, I firmly believe we have to work from the known to the unknown to assess any claims. We have to start with the basics of what we actually know about the archaeology, the geology, and the hydrology of Giza. And then we can move to the unknown, these fringe claims and the new methods used to detect these structures. While I am familiar with the archaeology and geology of Giza, and I have several videos that address these topics, I am no expert in radar remote sensing. So, to assess these new methods, I also spoke with Professor Larry Conyers. He is an expert in mapping underground archaeological features using radar. And he is especially appropriate here as he was actually one of the peer reviewers on a 2022 paper published by Filippo Biondi and Corrado Malanga, a precursor to the current claims that they're making this year.
9 months ago, when I got sucked into this whole controversy when it made the press, I spent way too much time looking at these people going on podcasts with people and talking about stuff, and it hurt my brain, but I couldn't possibly take it seriously because there was no meat on any of those bones whatsoever. So we're still here. Here we are now, a year later, and we're still actually 2.5 years later since that article was published, and we're still where we were before. We haven't gotten any farther.
Yeah.
We've got images, we've got interviews, we've got fancy words, And that's really all got.
That's all we got. Fancy words and interviews and a few images. So, look, we'll dive into the details of this new method, synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography. But I'm telling you, it's complicated, and I'd rather not put you to sleep at the start.
Is something penetrating the Earth? So in the case of radar, like you said, it's reflecting off the Earth's surface, pretty much superficial. What else is penetrating the Earth to even gather the data on the structures?
I tell you this, the satellites flies in the space on a velocity of approximately 7 kilometers per second. It means that in 1 second, the satellite has flow 7 kilometers. Then, this high speed, this high velocity permits the radar to synthesize a very generous Doppler bandwidth. Doppler, it means that the electromagnetic waves that we transmit and receive are frequency modulated by the movement of the Earth. Okay? If the Earth vibrates because of the presence of seismic waves, the presence of vibration due by the cities, the presence of vibration due by any natural phenomena occurring on the Earth while we are observing it by the radar, it means that the Earth is moving. And if this movement performs a frequency modulation on the returned signal.
Yep. I just love how Jesse Michaels keeps going, as if he actually understands what Filippo Biondi is saying here. He is so convinced by that absolute word salad that is meaningless to pretty much all of us. So, okay, look, these methods are complicated and unproven. Instead, let's start with the facts that we do know that are relevant to these claims. The team has claimed that these scans are evidence for a city deep under the pyramids. The mythological Amenti, claims that have generated significant press coverage in a number of newspapers. Here is Armando Mei presenting this conclusion at the recent conference known as the Cosmic Summit.
The Khafre Project SAR technology recently detected large subfaces anomalies, scientifically supporting this. Thus, Amenti might not only be a metaphysical real, but a physical reality beneath Giza. The Emerald Tablet describes Amenti's construction involving deep wells to bring light and life into it. This strongly resonates with Giza's archaeological landscape. Near the pyramid's eastern and western necropolises, numerous blocked vertical shafts exist, their depths unknown. It's plausible these shafts link to the megastructures recently detected by the SAR beneath Giza. Thus, the Emerald Tablet's wells may be more than symbolic. They could be forgotten vertical access points connecting surface monuments to a hidden ancient underground complex.
Look, we know there's no underground city hidden deep underground at Giza, 2 kilometers down, or anywhere else because of the fact that we started this video with, the geothermal gradient. At 2 kilometers of depth, the temperature would be scalding hot. It would be fucking 60 degrees Celsius, over 140 degrees Fahrenheit. People simply cannot live so deep underground. So, okay, one of the things that alternative historians say that we archaeologists should do is we should look outside archaeology to other fields that are relevant to their claims.
It's these other disciplines that have a whole different take on it. And it's, again, not a criticism of archaeologists to say they're not engineers. They're not engineers.
It's just fact.
It's fact.
Yeah, man, it's just fact. So look, if we want to assess what it takes to live and thrive and work so deep under the earth, we can look at a field outside of archaeology. We can look at deep mining. Because of the geothermal gradient, deep mines are exceptionally hot. For example, the world's deepest mine, the Maponeg gold mine in South Africa, goes down over 4 kilometers. and it has a specialized system to cool the temperature for the miners.
Because the mine tunnels are so deep into the earth, temperatures get up to a blistering 65.55 degrees Celsius. Ice has to be pumped into the shafts just to make working conditions bearable. The slurry ice allows for temperatures in the mid-80s, but the rock face and bodies of water scattered throughout the mine maintain blistering temperatures.
Hot temperatures are a problem in deep mines around the world, with mines reaching 1 kilometer or more reaching dangerous temperatures that are too hot for miners to work in. Remember, the enclosed space and the presence of groundwater also leads to humidity, with many mines reaching humidity levels of 90%. The combo of heat and humidity creates a wet bulb effect. Essentially, humans cannot survive in these conditions.
There's a dangerous combination of heat and humidity which is measured by a wet bulb. It's a kind of tipping point for the human body where we lose the ability to thermoregulate and things start going very wrong very quickly. We're talking about heat stroke, organ failure, death in just a matter of hours, and it's not anywhere near as hot as you might think.
If you've ever been in the subterranean chamber of the Great Pyramid, which I've been, you'll know that it's warm and it's humid. It's not even that deep underground, only 30 meters, but it maintains a fairly stable temperature of 20 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Similarly, if you've ever been down in a deep subway, like some of the deeper lines on the London Underground, you'll know how it's always warm and humid down there. It's not deep enough to be dangerously hot, but imagine going deeper and deeper. The world's first mining air conditioning system was actually installed over a century ago, in 1915 at the Marau gold mine in Brazil. Since then, similar systems have been installed in deep mines located around the world on every single inhabited continent. Here's an example presented by Agreco, which is a company that installs cooling systems within mines.
The challenge with any underground mine is that the deeper the mine goes into the ground, the hotter the atmosphere becomes. As the mine expands and deepens, the need for cooling increases. And that's where Agreco come in. As the leaders of underground mine cooling in Australia, our expert team were able to engineer a unique 12 megawatt thermal package, utilizing a range of specialized mine cooling equipment. From fluid chillers and cooling towers to diesel generators, we engineered a bespoke cooling solution that delivered 180 cubic meters of air per second into the mine at just 8 degrees Celsius.
Whew, it's getting hot in here. If I was promoting the Fringe idea that people were living in a city 2 kilometers underground, I'd be sweating bullets at this point.
Push up button!
Okay. The other big problem the Khafre team claims face is not just heat, but water. The geology and hydrology of the Giza Plateau have actually been intensively studied by scientists for decades. In fact, this was the issue that I first noted a week after the claims for these deep megastructures under Giza were made. Why? Because water's a big fucking deal. We have a good understanding of the hydrology of it. And for example, the water table is just not that low. More recent studies have looked at ancient water tables and where there's Nile branches, for example, Shisha et al. In 2022, and have shown how there was a branch of the Nile, the Khufu branch, that extended all the way up to the pyramids. So, the water table was quite high in the period of the ancient Egyptians, and it still is quite high. This is a photo from 1880, right at Giza Plateau, with the Nile flooding up quite next to it. And then this is explorations of the hydrology of the entire Giza Plateau, showing at the depth at which there is natural groundwater. So the groundwater table underneath, and we actually know that there's groundwater not very deep underneath the pyramids. And along the Giza Plateau, we've actually done ERT, not me, but these are teams that are actually managing Giza. They want to understand the water table, so they can understand how, for example, the Sphinx erodes in today's period, because the Sphinx is still eroding, as are many of the monuments there. The last time I was at Giza, it rained. So, you know, understanding how to manage this sensitive terrain is important. And so we have a good understanding of the hydrology and the depth of the water table. And it is still, it's not very deep. It's not 2 kilometers down. There's water there. So how are there megastructures built 2 kilometers underneath the water table? So yeah, water is a big fucking deal. The water table at Giza is variable, but it's no more than a few dozen meters underground at any place there. If there are structures that were excavated even deeper than that, they'd be flooded with this water. Again, humans could not live there in a city. It'd need to be a species of mermaids and mermen who are specially adapted to living in scalding hot water. So we can see this in one of the deep shafts at Giza, the Osiris shaft, which is about 30 meters underground and is flooded with water today. Mr. Beast and his team recently went swimming in it in their video on the pyramids of Giza.
Right in the center of the room is the sarcophagus of god Osiris.
Right here is supposedly the gateway to the underworld.
Yeah, so try to get in.
To the underworld?
Well, yeah. Screw it. Oh my god.
This sarcophagus is allegedly the portal to the underworld.
Again, we can turn to deep mines or other projects that excavate below the water table. Water flooding is a serious issue in these contexts.
How do you manage dewatering in high water table excavations? Imagine digging a deep hole in the ground and suddenly water starts rushing in from all sides. Managing that water is a key part of construction in areas with high water tables. When the groundwater level is above the bottom of your excavation, you need to lower it to keep the site dry and stable. This process is called dewatering. First, engineers evaluate the site conditions carefully. They check how fast water moves through the soil, how deep the water table is, and how much water needs to be removed. This helps decide which dewatering method will work best and be cost-effective.
These are enormous challenges for deep mines because the water is often mixed with debris from the excavation and the mining, which creates a slime or a slurry that traditional water pumps cannot handle due to the grit. So it requires a specialized solution in these circumstances.
Hi, I'd like to talk to you today about underground mine dewatering, or as it should be correctly termed, underground mine deslurrying. Slimes, which are a mixture of water and solids, are a common but challenging application in underground mining. Slimes collect in sumps or reception pits, which are located at various levels of the mine to allow the water and rock dust from drilling to flow into them as the mine progresses deeper underground. These sumps must be pumped out regularly to prevent flooding, which can pose both loss in production and safety risks to the mine and staff. Slimes are one of the most commonly dealt with but least well understood pumping issues for an underground mine. Very often, a mine will utilize water pumps to empty slime-filled sumps. Due to the abrasive nature and higher solids contents of these slimes, these water pumps will be destroyed in a matter of weeks or even days.
So look, the water table is a huge challenge for the Khafre team and their claims at Giza. While the team ignored this topic initially, in his recent interview with Jesse Michaels, Dr. Biondi acknowledged the fact that water would have filled these shafts. Here, let's watch him try and explain what it means.
Water. Water is the principal actor that is related to all these structures.
What role? Why do you say that? What role does water play in the pyramids?
Yes. Water, when flows, maybe let's say on the pipes, like that, it generates a certain information in terms of vibration that is very precise, because water is an important stuff of life that is present on the earth a lot. No, the earth is full of water. We are water, and so the pyramids and the water are connected together.
Yeah. Water generates information. Okay, yeah. I think I'm putting this tinfoil hat back on. I think I definitely need another sip of this whiskey. So, what the heck does this mean? Water generates information. I will give Jesse some credit because thankfully, instead of just going, he actually wants to know what this means.
And when you say generates information,
I tell you.
Yeah.
You know that we are made of water.
80% or something.
I think more.
Maybe more.
It depends on how you are watching your percentage. I tell you. In terms of mass of the molecules, I agree with you, 80%. But in terms of moles, it means number of molecules. We are 98 or 99%.
Wow.
It means that 1% of number of molecules have the weight of the 20% that you said before. Okay? In terms of number of molecules that is composed our body, we are 99% of water.
H2O.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So that's very important.
That's extremely interesting. Yeah. Wow.
If you are seeing it in terms of mass, okay, that 1% of molecules has the mass of the 20% of all the entire water composing my body. So 80%, 20% in mass, 99% and 1% in terms of
number of molecules.
I mean, that's just fucking genius right here. He's like, yeah, I'll answer that question. And then he just doesn't and starts talking about how humans are mostly made of water. Thanks. Yeah, does that mean we carry information in the water in us? I mean, like, please, do I need to wear the tinfoil hat to have it make sense? I actually am genuinely interested in how water can encode information here. But Jesse, of course, just goes, yeah, interesting. I agree. Yeah, cool. Fascinating. Okay, so fortunately, like half an hour later in the conversation, they return back to water. So maybe this time, this question will be answered.
Yeah, the water thing is so interesting. What do you think as far as you say water has information, and what is that? I mean, obviously there's a water table below the Khafre pyramid, but why is that significant otherwise as far as the pyramid structure itself?
Yes, thank you for this question. Is important. Water table. While if the Egyptian authority will give us the authorization to go there in situ and make measurements, maybe make some cleanings on the existing facilities.
Another absolutely clever answer. Really important question, Jesse, but I'm not going to answer it. I'm just going to talk about how I want to do some research on the site. So he does go on a few minutes later to state that he specifically wants to map out the water table on site.
We can do a lot of things. The first thing that we can do is to perform in situ measurements, so in situ measurements campaign using seismic reflectivity methods. Okay. Not Doppler tomography, other methods. So maybe to see if they match with my methods. And in that context, we will be able to map very precisely the water level under the plateau. That's the first thing that, in my personal opinion, we can do. Then we can measure perfect and so match the in situ measurements with my measurements and see how the depth of the existing shafts that are located on the Giza plateau.
Look, I don't know what to tell you, Biondi. I've already shown you the water table at Giza has been well studied on site, in situ. I'm not sure why Biondi cannot just use the published information about it. It's fairly comprehensive. It's in 3D. He never once acknowledges that these studies actually exist. Any good scientist should know that you should do some library research before you invest on repeating research that's already been done. And I want to be really clear here. The water table at Giza has been mapped out using a range of up-to-date methods, including the one that Filippo Biondi suggests that he wants to use. The methods used by Sheriff Feldman and his colleagues include electrical resistivity imaging, shallow seismic refraction, and ground-penetrating radar, in addition to testing these results using borehole drilling. So, okay, finally, later in the interview, finally, Biondi returns to Jesse's questions about water and explains his hypothesis for how the water might have functioned in these coils that go down 2 kilometers.
Maybe it can be hypothesized that this, as I told you, water is very important. Maybe the water goes through these spirals, and the spirals are made by piezoelectric material, and while the water is flowing through the spirals, are exciting this piezoelectric material that generates electricity. Something like that, maybe. But it's only an hypothesis. You have to go there and check.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yes, it makes so much sense. Well, this returns us right back to tinfoil hat territory, that the ancient pyramids were fucking power plants, which has to be the stupidest idea other than me trying to wear a tinfoil hat over my headphones. Because seriously, we have no electrical tools or devices from any site from ancient Egypt. And I like, seriously, we have thousands of copper tools from ancient Egypt. Copper is one of the best conductors that we use in today's world to conduct electricity. So where the fuck are all the wires or the coils or other uses of copper as a conductor from ancient Egyptian sites? We should have this. We have lots of copper. And look, stop right where you're at. I can hear those wheels turning in your head. You're thinking about the heat and the water together. But let's be clear, 60 degrees Celsius is not nearly hot enough to boil water. So there is no evidence for them creating steam power to power a turbine or something like that to generate electricity. It's all just so fucking silly. Fortunately, I've already debunked the idea of the pyramids of Giza as a power plant in a recent video explaining the function of the Great Pyramid. I mean, after all, where do these narratives come from?
Queen's chamber shafts is what's collecting the microwaves. The Queen's chamber shafts have what you believe some chemicals in there.
Right.
And then what is happening with those chemicals?
They're mixing and boiling off hydrogen.
Okay, so they're creating hydrogen.
Right.
And what is the function of the space in those shafts? Is that help the chemical process? Is that what it is?
The space in the shafts.
Where they're filling them up with liquid?
Oh, yes. That is predetermined to make sure that they maintain a head pressure. The fittings, or the metal fittings, I describe as switches, like fluid switches.
Mm-hmm.
So when the fluid or the chemical was covering those metal fittings, I call them electrodes. There would be a closed circuit when the fluid level dropped. It would open the circuit and signal the need for more chemicals to be pumped in order to maintain the head pressure, in order to make sure that there is an accurate supply of that chemical.
And so that chemical would pool up inside of the Queen's chamber?
It would probably, yes. I mean, there's a lot that is missing from the Queen's chamber.
Oh my God, this is just so stupid. Where's the evidence? You talk about metal fittings. We have metal from the pyramids. You remember that robot that went into the air shaft of the Queen's chamber? We have copper on the blocking stone there. There's actually a piece of iron that Colonel Vise found in the Great Pyramid. Where are your metal fittings? Where are your electrodes? Where are your switches? Where is the evidence for these chemicals pooling up there? Why do they not leave stains? You say, oh, well, stains might not survive in the Great Pyramid. People have been in and out of it for thousands of years. Bullshit. We have stains in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramids. They've been studied intensively by Mark Lehner. And in fact, they show up across the roof of the granite ceiling. And what these are is this is the impression left from the resin from wooden beams that were there. They've been mapped out very closely by Mark Lehner, and they actually match with other physical evidence. For example, the great crack that goes through. Look, I know I'm going to get a lot of comments here, but don't argue with me about this topic. I'm focusing here on what's under the pyramids rather than what's inside them. Instead, go watch that video. Comment on it if you want to understand the actual evidence for the function of the Great Pyramid, as well as when it was constructed. Because we have multiple lines of evidence, radiocarbon dates, textual sources, archaeological artifacts, all that clearly demonstrate it was built by the Old Kingdom Egyptians as a tomb for their pharaoh Khufu. And guess what? A new paper was just published recently this year about C14 dates in ancient Egypt, Old Kingdom Egypt, confirming yet again the ages of the pyramids and other sites across the country. A wide range of different sorts of evidence that all lines up to create a cohesive story. So furthermore, just to be clear here, when it comes to power generation, despite what you may have heard from online fake archaeology grifters, neither water nor granite are good conductors of electricity. The Egyptians had copper, but did not use it as a conductor. All right. Interestingly, Biondi's explanation here about power generation still sidesteps the earlier claims that Jesse was so fascinated about, that water somehow transmitted information. Whatever the heck that means. He never explains it. It is all a real jumble, and I'm sorry, I need another drink. I don't know what to say. You're driving me to drink, Filippo Biondi. So, okay. As we dive in, it's clear that we have two very big pieces of scientific evidence that debunk the idea that these supposed megastructures represent an underground city where people were living. It's so deep underground, it would simply be way too hot for humans to live, and it would be underwater. So this is what we call the known. We understand the archaeology, the geology, and the hydrology of Giza. And the extraordinary claims here seem implausible at best. So let's go dive into that water. Let's dive into the unknown. Let's look at the extraordinary evidence that the Khafre team presents in order to make their extraordinary claims. So let's talk about synthetic aperture radar, because the methods that Dr. Filippo Biondi used to supposedly detect these 2-kilometer deep megastructures under the pyramids of Giza is something called synthetic aperture radar doppler tomography. Now, the first half of that phrase, synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, it's actually a well-established technique that has been used by archaeologists and other surveyors for decades. Decades. It's a really well-established technique. Earlier this year, I spoke with Dr. Sarah Parcak, an expert in these methods and the author of the textbook Satellite Remote Sensing in Archaeology. So if there's anybody that can speak to these methods, she's one of them.
We ultimately have to be really critical of all the technologies we use because, as I said before, sometimes they don't work and sometimes multiple sensors will show what's there, give additional insights. So SAR data, any kind of radar data, is really useful and helpful for all the work that we want to do. So there are different kinds of synthetic aperture radar data sets, and it's different than active satellites in that there are radio waves that are sent down from the actual satellites. And there are different wavelengths that penetrate the ground or have different responses. So the L is the shortest, and that tends to have the best resolution. And the other wavelengths, so there's C and there's M, they're longer. And what this is super useful for is looking at like geological fracturing. So it's really important. So for example, if you're a geologist and you're interested in terrain mapping, where there are different deposits. So this shows different parts of the light spectrum and where different bands of information are located. It can be really helpful. So yeah, in that image showing the tree. So the big challenge with radar imagery is noise. It's very fiddly. Of all the satellite data sets that I have worked with, over the years, I have struggled the most with SAR data or radar set data. It's just because radio, right? There's radio waves, there's speckles, it's hitting anytime you're dealing with active satellites, it's hitting lots of features. So trees, ground cover, buildings, whatever is there. And what the satellites, what it's doing is you're sending the radio wave down and it's measuring the bounce back at different rates, densities. So for example, if there's something just under the ground, I'll try to angle my, maybe it goes here and then bounces back versus the others that are bouncing here. Okay, so there's something unknown, maybe. But it can only see up to a depth. The L band can only see up to a depth of 2 meters. And that is in perfect conditions, like perfect. So for example, let's just say that there's a 2 million year old riverbed buried beneath a desert like the Western Sahara of Egypt. Radar data has been used to map old river courses buried beneath sand, which is great, right? You have sand and then you have rock and it's seeing through the sand, maybe a bit deeper, but again, there's no interference, there's no buildings, there's no wires, there's nothing, and it's dry. Versus a site like Giza or any site that's next to more modern sites. Giza is dense rock. And we also have to look at the resolution, right? Resolution plus noise, and it's easy. It is so easy to overinterpret satellite imagery. Guilty as charged, Your Honor. I have done this before. I have gotten things wrong. So for all the guys out there who are like, yeah, but we looked at this thing and you were wrong. I admit it. I have been wrong. This is what science is. We test, we get wrong, we go to the field, it happens, we own it, we write papers about it, and then we keep pushing ahead. That's good science. But to do something and then almost willfully misinterpret it, like I could get any satellite imagery to look almost any way I wanted with enough manipulation. I am that good at it. And it scares me because that's why I'm so careful. I never misinterpret. Because you calculate things with the software, with weighing pixels, you don't see anything there, but trust me, it's there, right? Because it's the guise of the expert. So I think that's what these guys, they've done. They've willfully misinterpreted the data. And the satellite imagery, SAR data can't see through rock, period, the end.
So look, there's several important points here. SAR data relates to the reflection of radio waves from the Earth back to the moving satellite. It's data that is collected about distance and angles, while the images themselves are created by the researchers. So the images that you see are not data, but rather an interpretation of that data. So to better understand these methods, I also spoke with Dr. Larry Conyers, a specialist in mapping underground using radar. And he pretty much agreed with Sarah here, adding a bit of nuance and detail to how radar can and cannot map underground. That's what Sarah had to say. She thinks that they're willfully misinterpreting the data, essentially, and obviously using these fancy things like synthetic aperture radar, which cannot see through rock, and then claiming that they can see down 2 kilometers. What's your take on that?
Radar can't see. Well, radar can see a little ways through rock, but if you look at the type of material that those pyramids are built out of and what the ground is like on the Giza plateau, and I've looked at other data people have collected using ground penetrating radar on the Giza plateau using a variety of frequencies of radar, and they're really lucky to get 2 meters of energy penetration or so. All of a sudden, you're up against the constraint in radar, and that is electrical conductivity. And as soon as you have any kind of ground that has electrical conductivity, that radar energy, which is electromagnetic energy, there's 2 waves that move in unison and propagate and build upon themselves and keep the propagation going, which is the electrical and the magnetic wave. As soon as you take the electrical wave of an electromagnetic energy and conduct it away into the ground, you have attenuation. And I don't care what kind of frequency you try to put in the ground, it's still electromagnetic energy, and you might be able to get a little bit deeper with lower frequency energy, but you're still going to run up against that brick wall of attenuation. And what exactly it would be within the pyramid is probably maybe 3 meters, maybe 4 meters or so. But to get around that in the paper, if you read the paper, they go through all kinds of jargon like Doppler effect and things like that. And I read that and I thought to myself, what in the world are you talking about? Don't try to play these jargon games with me on Doppler effect with regards to electromagnetic energy. I just thought you can have all the Doppler effect in the world, but if you've got electromagnetic energy going into anything, whether it's rock or ground, it's going to attenuate, and it's going to attenuate at some measurable distance. And I don't care how much Doppler effect you can try to throw at it, that's what you're stuck with. So that's the long and the short of it.
So, all right, that gives us a sense of traditional SAR data. But the issue here is that Biondi claims to be using a new unproven method that uses SAR data to detect vibrations, the Doppler tomography part of the method that he claims to use. So this method was sort of published in 2022, though it was not presenting anything as extraordinary as its ability to map kilometers under the earth. A lot of people online think that this paper actually proves that there's these coils and stuff. It doesn't discuss them at all. I've read it 3 times. Instead, in this paper, Filippo Biondi and Corrado Malanga, they claimed that they could use it to map a few dozen meters within the Great Pyramid itself. So the internal structure of the pyramid, not underneath it. What's really relevant here is that Dr. Conyers, Larry, was one of the reviewers for this published paper. Here's what he had to say about his experience reviewing it.
Yeah, so I was one of the original reviewers of the article that was published in 2022, I think, something about like that. And having been a editor of a peer-reviewed journal for 18 years, I always try to be nice because you don't want to alienate any potential writers or scientists who you might want to rely on later on. And so I feel bad because I looked at that article and I wrote back to the editor of the journal and I said, this is a really interesting concept and I'd like to see it done, and methodologically it would be interesting, but they have tried to baffle me with equations. And if you've read that original article, it's about, I forget how many pages long it is, but half of the pages are these indecipherable equations. And my experience has been that whenever anybody throws equations at you, they're trying to baffle you with you know what. And so I wrote back to the editor of the journal and I said, well, I approve of what they're attempting to do, but I can't possibly approve that you publish this until you get a reviewer that can dig into all of that that they've presented and let you valid or not. And I left it at that. And then I didn't even give it another thought. I just thought, well, I've done my duty as a peer reviewer. And then lo and behold, last year this comes out and I just go, whoa, what is going on here? And of course, what happened was the reviewer could have cared less what my comments were. And since that time, I've looked into this journal, and they're one of thousands of journals that are out there right now that claim to be peer reviewed, and they're in it for money and profit, and they make a lot of money doing this and publishing articles for people who want to be published in peer reviewed journals, and I'm not sure the editors really care about the quality that's there.
I think it's MDPI that's doing it, and so they're known as like a predatory journal company. So, I mean, this has a lot of lessons here about peer review and about issues with publication in today's world where there's a lot of profit to be had. and obviously about kind of how to get your information out there. You pay the journal enough, they'll publish your paper. And it's pretty clear that even this original paper that has been published through peer review, apparently, it's not actually done much to convince experts in the field that these methods work. It hasn't even convinced the people who reviewed the damn paper. So they make this extraordinary claim within the paper that this method can map out structures inside the pyramid with millimeter precision, which is just not demonstrated from the images that they produce. I've discussed this topic earlier with Archaeology. Let's dive in. Let's look at some of the images from the paper and see if they match this millimeter precision that they're claiming.
At the same time, they saw something else, and they could describe it in millimeter precision, like almost like the pyramid. And that's what they saw. That's the tomography, and on the right, and on the left part of this page, you can see the tomography overlapped to a section of the pyramid of Khufu.
Which can I just make it, just looking at these images, to claim millimeter precision is the silliest thing in the world. This is so blurry. It is clearly not millimeter level precision. Like, it's nowhere near, even if certain aspects line up, this passageway right here, right? It doesn't even line up that accurately. You can see all kinds of problems with it. So, and to claim that these relieving chambers, this is the actual image, where are they at millimeter level precision? Like, fuck me, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Che cazzo.
Don't say these bad words. Come on. But yeah.
No frega un cazzo. Come on, non me ne frega un cazzo.
Me ne frega un cazzo. But yes. You're right. I wonder how they could describe so with that precision what they saw from these tomographies, because that's absolutely that's all they got. That's all they got from from their methodology. And also the reviewer, one of the reviewer in particular, he said that he had the impression, and you can see it, that they stretched the tomography in order to be able to overlap it with something, because you don't have units. You don't know what kind of units we are talking about. Is it kilometers, meters, grams?
Yeah, they don't have a scale bar here really at all for most of these images, do they?
What are we looking at? How big is the tomography? What's the scale of the section of the drawing of the pyramid? We don't know. We don't know how they did make it work. How they
but hey, millimeter precision. Millimeter precision. Take my word. Take my word. Che cazzo, che cazzo! Look, Mila, I'm going to continue using bad words in Italian because, seriously, what the flying fuck are these claims of millimeter precision? What they are is they are bogus. Absolute bogus. And Mila makes a fantastic point that without a scale bar, how do we even know what we're looking at? How do we know at all where things line up, what the units are, whether things have been stretched or not to match? We have no idea. And I want to emphasize these issues also exist, the same issues in the more recent claims made by the Khafre team about the stuff under the pyramids. And notice that none of the images they release includes a scale bar, which is something I chatted about with Larry as well.
What we were all taught in graduate school by our professors is don't even think about putting any kind of an image in anything you want someone to take seriously that doesn't have a scale and doesn't have a north arrow and doesn't have I mean, there is a little bit of a bar over there on the right-hand side of whatever that one image that apparently is telling us something about what those colors mean. But what exactly are these values that you have, and what is on X and what's Y on this 2D image? And so that's something I was taught when I was in graduate school, is don't even think about telling anybody what you've done unless you can at least do those three things.
I can't.
Yeah, there is an X and a Y. There's X and Y in there, and those are values of some sort.
I mean, like I said, this is screenshots from his presentation, and you can't even read what this is here. It's maybe intensita. That's the only thing I can think of. It's barely legible because it's just a screenshot, and that's all there is for this stuff. And
well, if it is intensity in Italian, then intensity of what?
Yeah.
Intensity of, or is this amplitude of waves? Is this how you, intensity is kind of how I feel. Maybe it's all about how I feel. how intense I am here. I don't know.
We are intense right now, that's for sure.
Well, we're having too much fun with this, perhaps. But anyway, let's move on.
I think having fun with it will help people see stuff as well. Good sense of humor helps people.
All right. Let's try.
Okay.
Let's try.
I am feeling pretty intense right now, I'll tell you that. Like, this is just bad science. Plain and simple, this is just bad science. And the problem is that nothing Biondi says makes any sense to experts like Larry. Let's see how Larry actually responds in real time to some of the explanations of the methods that Biondi presents to Jesse Michaels recently. Here, let's hear their word salad, how he puts it in a casual way rather than in paper. Because it is word salad, like you said.
I have to tell you this. That is very important because initially when we announced this discovery, there was a lot of mess in terms of scientific information. So misunderstanding, a lot of misunderstanding. Synthetic aperture radar cannot penetrate the Earth. So electromagnetic waves has only superficial interaction. According to the Maxwell theory, according to the past physics, classical physics, the interaction of electromagnetic wave is superficial. Maybe you can have a bit of penetration, but very, very few centimeters of penetration. In this case, we have developed a new technique which we are able to detect the superficial vibrations of the Earth. Why? Because vibrations penetrates the Earth. It means that photon and phonons, which is the quantum of light, of electromagnetic waves, and the quantum of vibrations, so photon and phonons, are separated by something called boundary. It means that light propagates only in the free space and not in the matter. Phonon propagates only in the matter and not in a free space. So in order to combine these two, we tried and we successfully combined the two informations given by the photon and by the photon. Where we have both of them? Try to guess where we have both of them. In the intersection.
At the boundary.
And at the boundary, we have the information of the photons and the phonons. We have the interaction of them. And there we were able to retrieve the so-called sufficient statistic in order to perform tomographic inversion and so to go deeply inside the Earth. So this is something that we have developed 2 years ago, and it is new. And at the beginning, people were not, was something new. So it had to pass some time in order to realize that this was possible.
Did that make any sense?
Yeah. And I took notes on that. And he was out of the same place talking about until he got to that part about the boundaries of photons and phonons, and then somehow stimulating that using electromagnetic waves, which would create some kind of vibrations of some sort, and I'm not sure what the vibrations are that he's talking about, but then using these vibrations to do tomographic inversions. I get that. I understand what that means.
Okay.
But he's taken three, maybe four, if I count them up, different variables and four different techniques. And one of them is just electromagnetic propagation. Okay, that's all really I was commenting on was the electromagnetic propagation. But he has somehow believed that electromagnetic propagation is creating other vibrations as yet undefined.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is also a boundary, this boundary of something, and that's light energy. That's what he's actually talking about is light. And between photons and phonons, and this is a new concept, and people who are smarter than I am in physics, my good friend Emo Trinks at University of Vienna in Austria studied that in some great detail. He's got a PhD in physics from Cambridge University, and he went, looked through everything they were saying. Just said, this is something that is not possible using all of the physics and everything we've understood about the way light or electromagnetic energy propagates.
So look, there you have it. Experts in these fields have devoted a good amount of time to reviewing these methods. Both Dr. Conyers, an expert in radar, and Dr. Trinks, a physicist. And these experts say that the methods proposed by Biondi are, quote, just not possible. And let's be double clear here. If these methods were actually possible, they'd be an absolute game changer and would have a range of uses beyond just archaeology. Filippo Biondi would be a wealthy man by now if his methods worked. Let's hear how he thinks they could be used. He's going to speculate on this a bit.
It can be used for everything, I suppose, for commercial purpose, because when we are able to retrieve the superficial vibration of the earth in order to perform tomography, we can use this technique maybe for mining, maybe for crude oil extraction, maybe for other kind of application that can be useful to humans.
Is it currently used for anything? Like I've heard that it might be used to map magma chambers and volcanoes.
Absolutely, yes. It can be used for map the magma chambers of the volcanoes. That, in my personal opinion, is very important to do this type of facilities.
So notice one thing here, as it's going to matter later. Biondi keeps saying maybe. Maybe this might be useful commercially. But in no ways does he say that it has been used in such ways. He only mentions the volcano thing because he's published on it. He is the only one who uses these methods. Nobody else in the world uses synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography. Only Filippo Biondi. So, okay then. This technology might be useful in many important contexts. And if so, why has Biondi not published it in more depth or worked to validate it in any scientific way?
He's absolutely right that his mess, as he called it, led to a great deal of skepticism by many people, because what he's proposing is something that, as far as any of us can tell, has never actually been proposed, tried on an experimental basis, and shown to actually work. And if this is so earth-shaking, what am I using that word for? But if this is so novel and interesting, then why hasn't somebody published a paper on this transfer of energy from electromagnetics to seismics that creates frequency modulations in a peer-reviewed journal like Nature or Science or Geophysics, or I can name some other top-tier articles? Why is he going to all the trouble to publish it in remote sensing by a Chinese publisher to get the word out? There's an interesting question.
You know, that is an actually interesting question. Why would he publish it in some junk journal if this is such an important method? So look, Biondi, of course, claims that he has tested and validated these methods in various contexts. But before we go into that, I want to be absolutely clear before we look at these examples that none of this has been published and reviewed by experts. But let's take a look and see what you all think about this shit show.
In those cases, they usually check out, they confirm what you see in the software.
You are speaking about validation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, have you been validated in other cases?
We did a lot of validation experiments. A lot of because as a scientist, I have to validate. No, how can I present my results like that? No, it's not possible. So you know that validating things that are underneath is very difficult.
Yeah, to go down is difficult.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible.
Yeah. Have you done it ever?
So the strategy that we have made is this. We know that there is a structure where we know everything about it, and in a certain depth. Okay, let's move there, and we try to perform tomographic inversion there, so to see if our results are matching with the reality.
Have you done those experiments?
Yes.
Okay. Have you done a lot of them?
Ecco, that's another point. It's another point of view. 3 or 4 experiments.
Okay.
I tell you, it's very difficult to do validation. Sure. So we did measurements of the Gran Sasso d'Italia Physics Laboratory.
Okay.
Located inside the mountain. It's 200 kilometers far from here. And we depicted the laboratory.
Okay.
That's our measurements and the reality.
How accurate?
No, 100%. They match.
100%.
So he goes from, we've done a lot of these experiments to validate, to only 3. And apparently his mapping matches reality 100%. Specifically for this underground laboratory in Italy, Gran Sasso d'Italia. So again, I have to be absolutely clear. He has not published anything about Gran Sasso d'Italia in any scientific article. It's just images that he's produced and a couple videos that show overlays that are available on his personal website, harmonicsar.com. And the website itself is actually pretty weird because there's no captions or text. It's just random images with no explanation. So let's check out the video and see if reality matches his method and if it matches 100%. If it's 100%, it should be simple to see that it's just a perfect match with millimeter precision, if you will. So this is the overlay right here. This is the overlay. So this is the image that he overlays on his data. And I mean, is this what you'd call 100%? Like, look, this whole thing isn't here at all. It's off by quite a bit. We'll play this again. You can just see how off this is. Where are these perpendicular lines in his SAR images? Where is this stuff? It is certainly not matching anywhere near 100%. This isn't even fucking close, because I don't know. I guess I gotta put the tinfoil hat back on, because if you squint at it, let's squint. Let's see if wearing the tinfoil hat helps. Fuck, maybe if I have a drink? Yeah. Sorry, dude. You're full of shit, man. You're absolutely full of shit. And people are buying this. They don't go to his website and fact check him, because, like, this is not close at all. Anyone with 2 eyes can see that this does not match. Lots of detail is missing. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Do your own research. The research is there. His website is there. And notice there's no scale bars. There's nothing that provides context for this generated image to even know that it comes from that mountain where Gran Sasso d'Italia is located. And I got to emphasize, this is a big deal because he has created these images. SAR does not just produce images. It produces data about the reflection of radio waves back to a satellite. You use algorithms that you create to create these images. So he's the one that's processed these images, claiming it's 100%, where if you just look at it with your own eyes, this is not 100%. So I don't actually know what to say. This is not good.
I was going to say, as Sarah just said earlier when we were talking in that video, that she's smart enough that she can make any data set do anything she wants to. She can make her data set from satellites jump through hoops if she cared to. And back when I first started in this business, long time ago, we used to have specialized people in data processing. And the joke was that if you don't like your results, send it back to the processing people and they can give whatever results you wish.
So I really don't know what to say. Without an actual publication that presents actual data, without a publication that demonstrates these methods actually work, while claiming that it's 100% a millimeter level precision, this is all just fantasy. And I want to be clear with you here. I actually think I can prove to you that Dr. Filippo Biondi himself knows that this is all fantasy and it does not work. So, for one, Dr. Biondi is an academic with a PhD. He has many peer-reviewed articles. If these methods are as effective and as game-changing as he claims they are, then why the fuck is he not publishing them and convincing other experts? If this was a slam dunk, it should be easy to do that. Instead, what he's doing is he's going on podcasts and speaking at fringe conferences, presenting it to the public for fame and fantasy and fortune. More importantly than that, if this was actually so lucrative on a commercial level, if it could help out with, prospecting for valuable minerals or for oil and things like that, like, let's be honest, if it actually worked, why does he give 2 shits about these structures under the pyramids? And why is he not cashing in by working with corporations? And I'll forgive you if you think that he actually might be. I will, because his website, for example, he claims that he's put in a patent application for this method. It's right at the very bottom of his website, Harmonic SAR. It says, submitted patent application of tomographic Doppler imaging on the 29th of May, 2023 to PCT WIPO. Submission number 120776659, PCT application number PCT/EP 2023/064345. So putting in a patent seems like exactly what you'd do if you wanted to capitalize on a new method like this commercially. Except there's a real serious issue here. If you do your research into these patents, Dr. Filippo Biondi does not actually have this patent. He did have a patent for this, but he let it expire. And I'm going to repeat that one more time before I show you the details. Filippo Biondi had a patent for synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography, the method here, but he let it expire. As of today, as of this year, he no longer owns a patent for this method. So, okay, I've done some research. The patent application he mentions on his website that we just read was actually the second patent application he put in. In 2022, Biondi filed a patent in Malta, in the country of Malta, for synthetic aperture radar underground, undersea, under ice, and inside distributed targets tomographic Doppler imaging. He applied for this on April 7th, 2022. It was registered on October 8th, 2022. And guess what? It expired on April 7th, 2024. This patent is no longer valid. In 2023, Biondi filed an international patent application with the Patent Cooperation Treaty. That's the PCT abbreviation that we saw on his website, the Patent Cooperation Treaty. And you can compare the number on this application here. PCT EP 2023-064345. That's exactly what he mentions on his website. So this is what he's talking about, is this the Patent Cooperation Treaty. And so if you notice on this one, the application was May 29, 2023. It was published on January 11, 2024. On January 4th of this year in 2025, it was anticipated to expire, and right now it is ceased. It is expired. This is the international version of that patent that we saw that he filed in Malta. It's again for synthetic aperture radar underground, undersea, using tomography and tomographic spatial high resolution imaging. So I've searched other patent databases. These are the only two patents that Filippo Biondi has applied for this method of synthetic aperture radar Doppler tomography. So I want you to ask yourself, if Dr. Filippo Biondi's method is such a game changer that it can be used for the prospection of valuable minerals and oil, let alone for archaeological and geological applications, why the fucking hell would he let his patents expire? The reality is that this is all fake. It's all bogus. He's just great at playing this game for attention. For example, Jesse Michaels repeatedly mentions that this method is used commercially.
So, in this moment, we are working on a scientific paper. The scientific paper is, let's say, under review.
Mm-hmm. Is it peer review?
Peer review, yes, only peer review. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have a timeline on when it might get accepted? Or?
I don't want to say something because it is a bit, it is under review.
Yeah.
And let's see what happens.
That's exciting.
Let's see what happens.
Well, I hope it gets peer review. I mean, that would be very exciting.
I don't know what happens. Maybe we'll be rejected. I don't know. But if we'll be rejected, we have to know why.
Yeah.
If we'll be accepted, or 100% will be some revision to do.
I don't. If you're just saying these are the findings, I don't know how it can be rejected. If you're saying we use Doppler tomography in all these other cases that involve life or death or normal commercial business cases, so it's useful in the free market context where people have skin in the game on it being useful, and then you're saying we've done cases of validating that it works by going inside of a few things that we've measured.
I don't even know what to say. He's contradicting himself. He says we're working on a paper and it's under review. He claims because it's under review, he can't talk about it, which that's not any ethics in science. If your paper's under review, you can still present it at conferences. You can present your ideas on podcasts, as he is anyway. So there's no problem with talking about it. And to Jesse, I don't really know what to say. If you go and look at this validation that we saw, the Gran Sasso d'Italia, it looks sketchy. And if you go back and listen to your own interview with Filippo Biondi, you know, the clip that I played earlier, he never mentions once that this method is used commercially. Not once. He said maybe it could be used in these ways. And so the reality is that nobody with skin in the game uses this method. In fact, nobody uses this method at all except for Filippo Biondi. If you think otherwise, prove it with a specific example. I'm waiting for you to make a comment. The interesting thing here is Biondi seems comfortable letting Jesse keep saying that it's widely used. He never once corrects him. And this is sort of a trend. Biondi is quite skilled at this. By not answering questions very clearly, he lets people believe what they want to believe. And he's not on the hook for having lied. Let's take this example. I think this one is really telling.
Wow. I mean, I think it's very important for people to hear that this method is used in business contexts when money is on the line, or in the case of Mount Vesuvius, so that another Pompeii doesn't happen. Lives are on the line.
Yes.
So this is a tried and true method, Doppler tomography, because it's really funny, man. Like, even in preparing for this interview, you can chat GPT, your finding under the Khafre pyramid. The response you get back is synthetic aperture radar can't penetrate below, a quarter of a centimeter below the Earth.
Yeah.
They don't even mention the Doppler tomography, which is used in all these other contexts. So it's just bizarre. like
I
it's,
don't know why.
I don't know why either, man. It's yeah, okay. So that's really helpful that it's used constantly. And I think it's important for people to understand your background as well. You do some work with the Italian military that's classified. You can't even speak about it, right? So it's clearly useful to them because they don't want anybody talking about it. Should I not even be asking about that? Okay, I'm just saying the facts that you do it. Are you not supposed to say? Okay, sorry. I mean, in the US, like, you can say, like, I do work, I just can't talk about it. But you don't even want to say that you do the work. Okay. Forget it.
Does Filippo Biondi work with the Italian military? Who the fuck knows? He didn't answer the question. He just gave... And it's clear here that Jesse and everyone else is making all these assumptions. And funny enough, ChatGPT here is absolutely correct. It's not correct because SAR can penetrate more than a quarter of a centimeter. So it doesn't have all the specifics correct. But it is correct that SAR Doppler tomography has never been proven to work. No expert thinks it works other than Filippo Biondi. It is not and has never been used in commercial cases. It is not used by the military. There's no proof of that. And the only fucking person in the world who uses it, Dr. Filippo Biondi, let his patents expire, which is definitely a vote of real confidence there. So this is like crazy. The reality here is this all comes down to the fact that a lot of people really want this to be true. People have been fantasizing about cities, treasure, and advanced technology under the pyramids of Giza for centuries. And in this anti-intellectual day and age that we live in, when so many people hate on actual archaeologists because they want their fantasies to be true, this example promoted by people with advanced degrees really tickles them silly.
Yeah, I mean, more of these conversations and more people have to understand that these things are being discovered and that we are kind of confused about so many things about human history. And we're being told that, no, there's people at the universities that have all the answers and that it's literally not possible that they're telling the truth. It's not possible. And that's why I get so excited about the structures under the pyramid, because it's a gigantic fuck you to all those people.
It would be, yeah.
It would be the most gigantic fuck you of all time if they found out that those scans are accurate and there's these pillars that are wrapped in coils that go down like hundreds of meters, and then below them there's additional structures and the whole...
See, that's the fucking motivation here. These people want to wear their tinfoil hats and say, fuck you to all the academics out there. But the reality is that these people are all fucking idiots. That is what they are. They hear what they want to hear, and they leave it at that. They say to each other, do your own research. But they don't actually bother to do any research. They don't check the fucking guy's website and his validations. They don't look into the patents. They just repeat the same bullshit over and over and over and over and over again. Like, I don't know what to say. Seriously, let's just entertain for one quick second that these megastructures do exist under the pyramids. Let's think about the implications here. Look at them. If they really went down 2 kilometers, they are absolutely enormous. There are no scale bars. They've not provided any measurements. So I have absolutely no way to tell you how much volume of stone would have been excavated out. But it would have been immense. dwarfing the volume of stone used in the pyramids themselves. So, where is all this material, all the spoil that would have come out of these holes that were excavated out, these coil passageways in the giant chambers down at the bottom? Because the reality is that spoil heaps from large mines are super visible. They completely transform the landscape around them. So where the fuck is the debris from excavating out such a huge set of megastructures? The area around Giza has been intensively surveyed by archaeologists and geologists for like 2 centuries. They've identified bedrock areas. They've identified sand dunes. They've mapped archaeological features like the entire fucking cemetery there. But guess what? There are no spoil heaps of debris from these megastructures. Furthermore, what about structural stability? Excavating out such a hollow cavity would destabilize the landscape. The enormous chamber below these coils is said to be 80 meters wide and 80 meters high, a cube with a flat roof. Let's hear Biondi describe it.
The tomographies are public, so we have done a scientific interpretation of those tomographies, and they are like tubes that are connected to the base of the pyramid. We are counting at the moment 4 plus 4 tubes that are descending underneath, and they are connecting the top, so the base of the pyramid, to something that is located at the bottom. So at the bottom, we probably have huge chambers for approximately 80 meters wide, of width, and also of height, 80 meters.
Wow.
On the bottom.
On the bottom.
The roof of these chambers would need to support an immense weight. The weight of the pyramid above, plus the weight of over 1.5 kilometers of rock. Like, let's just take the Great Pyramid as an example of the immense weight that needs to be dealt with. They show up across the roof of the granite ceiling. And what these are is this is the impression left from the resin from wooden beams that were there. They've been mapped out very closely by Mark Lehner, and they actually match with other physical evidence. For example, the great crack that goes through the large granite slab that makes up the ceiling of the chamber. Petrie was the first one to notice that this must have cracked during the construction of the pyramid. Why? Because the crack was repaired with mortar. As Miroslav Werner describes, the crack very probably appeared before the pyramid was finished and must have been accompanied by an ear-splitting noise. Subsequently, the builders decided to consolidate the stability of the ceiling by inserting wooden beams under the ends of each ceiling block, as faint imprints of the wood on the ceiling indicate. We can also move on and yet again look to the example of modern mines. Large caverns that stretch dozens of meters across. They require reinforcement. And guess what? They don't have a flat roof, but rather an arched roof to relieve stress and send it off to the sides. Of course, Biondi's cube-like chambers simply wouldn't work, as they have a flat roof. They collapse like a house of cards under this weight. And when you look at large mines, those that are not planned out well nor maintained, they not only collapse, but they can destroy an entire landscape through subsidence. So there you have it. The reality is that these so-called megastructures under the pyramids are simply too good to be true. The methods have never been proven, and when you look at the results closely, they don't pass the sniff test. They fucking stink, man. And look, I want to be clear, as archaeologists, we would love it if this was true. It would be fucking fascinating. We do our jobs to rewrite history. I would love it if something like this was true.
It would be the best thing in the world for Egypt, for tourism, for national pride, if they found out that the pyramids had some elaborate substructure and some exotic functionality that we don't know of today.
Even the Egyptians would love it if this were true. It'd be great for their tourism. They'd get a lot of attention. They'd have national pride. They want these things. But unfortunately, the reality is that these claims are not true. There's plentiful evidence against them and not any evidence for them. It's all fucking bullshit.
So excited. And it does feel like these sort of discoveries are speeding up. I don't know why. I think people are kind of waking up, collectively to some of these ideas, becoming more open-minded.
No, man, people are not becoming more open-minded. They're becoming more gullible. These discoveries are not speeding up. Bullshit is spreading more rapidly, and people are believing it, leading to more bullshit artists popping up and reaching for fame and fortune. Look, even Biondi doesn't have enough faith in these methods. He's not tried to publish them in a good journal. He's not even released the images for these claims on his own website. They've not written this up as a blog or anything else in text. There's nothing about these megastructures on his website, on Corrado Malanga's website, or any of the websites associated with the Khafre team. It just exists as YouTube videos. And more importantly, Filippo Biondi let his patent expire. Absolutely pathetic, man. Absolutely pathetic. He doesn't even believe in this method. It's clear. He doesn't even fucking believe in it. And look, if these megastructures did exist, let's be clear. They'd be way too hot for people to live or work there. They'd be flooded with groundwater, so anyone who was down there would need gills to breathe. Excavating them would have left behind enormous spoil heaps that simply don't exist, and they would have collapsed a long time ago, subsiding the entire landscape around it. I'm sorry to say, but these are extraordinary claims, and as we've seen when we've dug into the research, there is no extraordinary evidence for them. So if you still believe in these claims after seeing this video, you should be wearing a tinfoil hat out in public when you go out. You should be shamed for believing and being so gullible at this kind of stuff. So, I don't know what else to say. There you have it. That is the ultimate debunk of the Under the Pyramid scans. Make sure to hit like, give it a hype, leave a comment, and yeah, love and archaeology to y'all. I'll be back soon.
Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, flint, untibble. Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, fibble, 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 untibble, Flynn, untibble, Flynn, untibble, Flynn, untibble, Flynn.